Mr. Weibel, thank you very much for coming. I'm just curious to know a bit more about you and also your life before Siemens. So a little bit of a potted history quickly around your career leading up to you joining the business, if you don't mind.
Yes, it's my pleasure. As a background, I'm an electrical engineer and then passed the European examination as a patent attorney, did the German qualification as patent attorney, and have since always been working in industry. First of all, I started with ABB in Switzerland. Then I left ABB for a Swiss-German group of companies called George Fisher, where I restructured the IP department. Then they called me back for ABB Switzerland, where I took over the lead of the IP department. And then in 2007, I was nominated as Chief IP Counsel for ABB Limited worldwide. And since 2013, I'm now working for Siemens as Chief IP Counsel.
What brought you here?
It was the challenge to lead one of the biggest, if not the biggest, industrial IP department in the world. And Siemens has really a very, very nice tradition in terms of patents. As you probably know, Werner von Siemens was an inventor himself. And patents and IP enjoy a lot of understanding in Siemens, and that's great for me to get this job.
It's a huge challenge in many respects. Is that what appealed?
Of course, because it's huge. It's huge in terms of numbers. It's huge in terms of staff. We're talking about, in total, as Siemens as a group of companies, we're talking about nearly 500 people that work for IP. And in terms of numbers of patent filings, we have a portfolio of over 100,000 granted patents and pending patent applications. Year by year, we file 3,700 to 4,000 new patent applications. So that's really a huge challenge to deal with.
A very complex challenge?
Yes, it is complex because I personally feel that the importance of IP in a digital world becomes more and more important. And IP rights maybe have a little bit changed their role, where in former times it was more Daniel Düsentrieb approach of inventions, where you invented something really basic. Now it's more a contribution to a digital ecosystem and to make sure that you can protect your share and your competitive advantage in this field.
What do you love most about your job?
I love the variety of technical solutions, which is particularly so for Siemens. And I love this combination of legal questions and technical questions, and to convince people how or what role and how important IP rights are for their business success.
Is there such a thing as a typical day for you?
Not really, but my day is mainly dominated by meetings, now virtual meetings in the times of Corona, strategic meetings to set the tone where we should go in a litigation, etc. Then, of course, I have a lot of HR issues to deal with. And what I particularly love is also to do some lobbying, governance issues, etc.
So tell me about your role beyond the role that you currently have within the organization. I think we talked about the VPP earlier. What is that, and what's your role there?
Yeah, I'm the president of VPP. That's the Association of Patent Professionals mainly active in industry. And there I try, let's say, to influence and to lobby for a good development of the patent and IP system in Germany. And I'm doing the same on a European level, where I'm the president of the European Umbrella Association of Patent Attorneys in Industry.
Okay, tell me a little bit more about the goal that you're moving towards? What's the plan? What's your strategy?
The strategy of IP for Siemens is what we call to create values for the businesses of Siemens. So we call our strategy value-driven IP strategy. That means we would like to harvest the inventions and to protect them by IP rights so that they are able to create value for the company. And that's, of course, a big challenge, and that's a difference to what I call an invention-driven IP policy or IP strategy, where the patent attorneys, so to speak, wait for inventors to have good ideas, and then they take the ideas and protect them by IP rights. I would like to have a much more proactive, interactive approach where the patent attorneys go out, integrate themselves into the innovation process, talk to the researchers, to the developer, and harvest and grasp the ideas that have, understand what the business model of the business is, understand where the competitive advantages are, and then actively place valuable IP rights on these sweet spots. And by that, I would like to increase the value we create for the business with such IP rights.
Is this part of the drive towards a quality-driven strategy over quantity?
Exactly. That's exactly the main point of a quality versus quantity strategy. It doesn't really create any value whether you have thousands of patents or whether you have one single very valuable patent. And that's what I'm striving for. And in order to do that, we also need to have a tool to measure quality and to measure quality of patent portfolios.
Okay, so this does also mean that the role of a patent department is more elevated, not just within Siemens, but in general. Do you think that it should be playing a bigger strategic role to the business than it has been in the past?
Yeah, I do think so, and I think it will become even more important with the digitalization and the Internet of Things. Because there, I think we have a kind of changed role of IP rights, where in the past, patents in particular were mainly used to enforce and to block competitors. Patents now more and more are important to document one's contribution in a digital interconnected ecosystem, where you work together with different partners that contribute to a solution, where you exchange solutions, where you license solutions, etc. And you can only share and license something where you have ownership of, because otherwise it's here for everybody and you cannot share and license and make money out of it. So therefore, in order to achieve that, we need more and more IP rights, and we need a different role of IP rights, and we need a different understanding how we create these IP rights.
Tell me about your team and how it's structured. You mentioned 500 people earlier.
Yes, indeed. It's about 500 people. We have IP departments for each and every Siemens company. In the meantime, there are 3 main Siemens companies. It's Siemens Energy, Siemens Healthcare, and Siemens Limited. We have one dedicated team for all these companies, which is kind of brought together and kept together with what I call a IT and administrative backbone that is driven out of Siemens Limited.
How is your team measured?
My team is measured on how many patent filings we are doing, but also how our quality develops. That's the most important measure for me. And here we really have seen quite a nice increase of how the quality of the patent portfolio has developed after we introduced this value-driven IP strategy that I mentioned earlier.
Tell me what's at the top of your agenda in the short and mid-term. What's going on now that's kind of worthy of talking about?
As I said, digitalization and industry, Internet of Things creates a lot of challenges because it's even more challenging and hard to understand what role a technical idea has in such an ecosystem. So I need to teach and train my patent attorneys to understand the business models, to understand what role such an idea has in a business model, and how we can protect this technical and competitive advantage with IP rights. That's probably the biggest challenge we have in the moment.
Have you had these barriers before in your career?
No, it really changed because, as I said, it has become more digital, more software. We use artificial intelligence. We have new technologies like blockchain, etc. And all these technologies, software, artificial intelligence, blockchain, are, let's say, at the rim of patentability. So getting a patent for such inventions is much harder than for a mechanical invention. That was the main inventions I had before.
Can you just give me a sense of what might be the consequences if you don't get this right, if you don't overcome these challenges? What impact might that have on the...
Then we just pile up patents where at the end, I have to say, there's not really value in it, and we have high maintenance cost, and we cannot add value to the business by protecting our competitive advantage. But we just pile up patents, thousands of patents, and that's not worthwhile the money.
But what might be the consequence to the business if that continues, or that was the case?
Then, they have high costs, and then they cannot protect their competitive advantage, and that's the challenge. And to protect the competitive advantage, you must understand how the business model works, where the USPs are, and then you must interlink that and place your IP rights exactly on this pot.
Does the board of Siemens take this seriously, that I presume you present your thoughts to the board? Can you talk about the challenges there, if there are any?
Yeah, in the boardroom, it would be very easy if I just presented that we're again number one in patent filings in Europe, as we have been 2 years ago. But that's too easy, I would say. I would rather like to show in the boardroom how our quality improved and that we create value for the businesses, that we are able to defend our competitive advantage, that we are able to defend our inventions even in countries like China, that we're successful in collecting licensing income, that we are successful in defending our technology against competition.
Have the board attitudes changed at all since you moved to this new strategy?
Yes, indeed. They are looking very carefully at the development of the quality of our patent portfolio, and it's on the agenda at least once or twice a year of the board. And then the expectation, of course, is that we are able to further increase the quality of our portfolio compared to competition.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more. You talked earlier about your patent attorneys going into the business. How do you make more, entrepreneurs out of your attorneys?
Yeah, exactly. That was a big challenge because, as I mentioned, the inventions become more and more complicated. So we first had to teach them how to protect software, how to protect inventions in the field of artificial intelligence and blockchain, etc. But we also had to teach them to better understand the business model of a business. And in order to do that, we run sessions where we use the business model canvas methodology. where you define what your key markets are, what your key customers are, what your USPs, unique selling propositions are. And by understanding that, the patent attorney is in a better position to understand what role an invention plays for a business. And then he or she is able to protect it best and to make sure that we have the IP rights at the sweet spots that are our technological and competitive advantage.
Tell me a little bit more about what you were doing pre-PatentSight that has changed since you've started working with PatentSight. So how did you do this job before PatentSight came along?
Yeah, actually, it's not like this, so to speak. I introduced PatentSight or just a few years or a few months after I started working for Siemens, because my predecessor had a clear volume strategy. We were regularly number 1 and number 2 in European patent filings. But coming from a competitor, to be very honest, I had a high impression of the volume of Siemens' patent portfolio, but not so much of the quality of the patent portfolio. And therefore, I thought we need to introduce a measure and a tool to measure the quality of the patent portfolio, because only what you measure will be improved. And in that respect, PatentSight helped us a lot, because PatentSight allowed us to kind of objectively measure the quality of a patent portfolio. And not only the, let's say, quality right at the moment, but also the development of the quality. And that's very important if you have a long-term strategy, that you have an opportunity to see how the quality develops over the years. Whether your measures that you introduced, the measures that I mentioned in connection with this value-driven IP strategy, really have an impact on the quality.
Did you know PatentSight before?
No.
How did you come across the business?
To be honest, I have no idea anymore.
Okay, let me ask you another question. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, once you've identified the problem, how did you go about finding potential suppliers to help you overcome that? You happy with that?
No.
No? Okay.
Because we had no choice. There are some specific features of PatentSight which convinced me that it's a good solution to measure quality. One really important aspect is that PatentSight came out of a university, so it has an academic objective background. It's not just commercial background as many other tools and many other applications have. So PatentSight has this academic background, which was quite important for me. Then, as I mentioned, it's important not to look at the absolute figure of a quality index right at the moment. It's more important to see how you develop, and how you develop in particular vis-a-vis your competition. And that also is offered by PatentSight, because they have the possibility to show the development on a comparable basis, meaning PatentSight invests a lot on investigating and monitoring how companies change in terms of acquisitions and divestitures, etc. And that can, of course, influence the value of your portfolio dramatically, because if you acquire a company or if you divest a part of your company, then your numbers are immediately affected. And PatentSight is able to monitor the patent quality on a comparable basis. So they take these changes into account and very closely monitor how companies develop, how they consist, what parts go in, what parts go out. So that was also very important for me. And then in terms of the indexes that PatentSight uses to measure quality, and there are also differences how patents are cited in the US, how patents are cited in Germany, how patents are cited in China, for example. And PatentSight also takes these differences into considerations and adapts the indexes accordingly. And by that, you get, as far as possible, an objective measure of the quality of your patent portfolio.
How did you validate that PatentSight was correct with its metrics?
I mean, being correct is a hard word here, but...
Did you challenge them?
Of course, we challenged them by cross-checking whether the patents that we feel internally are our most valuable, whether they also score high in PatentSight. And the same we did for our competitors' patents, where we selected a few really high impact patents and then cross-checked whether they also have a high quality index in PatentSight. And there was quite a good match. I would say the bigger the portfolio is, for statistical reasons, the better the match is.
And in what way did PatentSight mirror your strategy of moving towards quality over quantity? Just a few words around that.
I mean, measuring the quality of a patent is really a very tricky thing, because at the end you have to say the quality of a patent is measured in court, but only 5% at max go to the court or litigated. So you need to have a, let's call it, indirect measure of the quality of a patent. And the PatentSight offered a great approach and a reliable and objective approach to measure the quality of single and of a whole portfolio of patents.
Can you talk me through the early experiences then, once you decided to bring PatentSight on board? What were the first steps? How did you begin the process of change?
So we first introduced our change in the strategy, and then we were looking for a tool that could accompany and give us the measure to, or a tool that measures whether our change in strategy is successful. So that was kind of the sequence. And then I have to confess I was a little bit anxious, because if you look at this PatentSight bubble, there are also ways, just by spending more money, let's put it like this, to improve the bubbles, to improve the quality. And I was a little bit anxious when I first presented our bubbles, our PatentSight graphs in the managing board, that they said, now we have a measure for patent quality. Now our expectation is that you increase it by 20% every year. And this could have easily be done, for example, by just spending more money for a broader geographical range. But I was lucky that the managing board trusted me and trusted the PatentSight tool, that it is objective and that we can increase our quality index by harvesting more valuable inventions and by creating broader and more important patents. So, and in order to see this effect, it took some time, I have to say, maybe 2 years, where we really could see that after the introduction of our value-driven strategy, that the quality indexes measured by PatentSight went dramatically up. And then I felt quite relieved, I have to say.
And that was without the budget going dramatically up, the cost?
No, not big. No, we kept the budget the same.
And the board were happy with this? You took bubbles into the boardroom?
Yes. They were very happy, and they were in particular very happy comparing the bubbles with competition.
Did anything happen that you weren't anticipating?
No.
That's fine. Did everything go according to plan?
Honestly spoken, I would have wished to see an earlier development, but to influence the quality of a patent portfolio of more than 60,000 granted patents, it takes some time, and therefore at the end it came out very well, but I wished that it would have been earlier.
Okay. Can you give me a sense of how your team reacted to the PatentSight solution?
I mean, you can question, of course, all solutions measuring quality, be it PatentSight, be it other tools. And this also happened at the beginning, that the number of the businesses, or also internally of the patent attorneys, they were focusing on the weaknesses of a measuring tool like PatentSight. But I always try to explain that we're not going to improve the bubbles of PatentSight. That's not our goal. The goal is to improve the impact, the value we create for the business, and that we only use PatentSight only to measure whether the change in strategy is really successful. So it's not about improving the bubbles, it's about improving the quality of the patents. And by PatentSight being a good tool measuring quality and an objective tool measuring quality, the bubbles should go up with this change of the strategy.
Did it require a shift in mindset? Did it require new training? What were the considerations for the wider team?
Yeah, it required a shift in mindset, in particular that you're not, let's say, passively sitting in your office as a patent attorney and waiting for inventors to come to present their invention. But it meant that the patent attorneys have to go out to the R&D departments, to the innovation teams, and actively harvest ideas and place IP rights where we need them. And that was the biggest change and challenge on how patent attorneys had to work.
And they've met that challenge now?
They have met it, yes. I mean, we still can improve, but we can see from the development of the PatentSight bubbles that our change in strategy was really successful.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the relationship with the PatentSight team and just describe to me what that has been like?
The relation with the PatentSight team is great, I have to say, because we also had our own understanding of how a tool should work, what we need, what our needs are for a tool, what changes we need, and all these requests, change requests, etc., have always been very well received and very well worked on in the course of the time that we're using PatentSight.
What lessons have you learned along this journey that perhaps you weren't anticipating?
Yeah, one lesson I learned is that it takes longer to move the patent portfolio or the quality of a patent portfolio. And another lesson I learned is that measuring the quality can also vary from, let's say, from month to month. And if you're looking at the bubbles, the PatentSight bubbles in too much detail, then you can draw wrong conclusions. So you always need to keep the big picture in mind and keep the development of the bubbles in mind. That's, in my view, the most important thing, that you have a look at the development of the bubbles. And there we have, I think, a very good example in the field of digitalization and Internet of Things, where Siemens, compared with other competitors, software companies and hyperscalers, we can see that the development of the quality of our patents in that field of Siemens is really best in class. We have in, let's say, 5-10 years ago, we had a stable development of the quality, and then it went steeply up, where all the other hyperscalers, they clearly have a decreasing quality development. And that was a very nice result of our change in the strategy.
Excellent. How close are you to fulfilling the mission of moving from quantity to quality? Or is that never-ending journey?
I think it's a never-ending journey, and it particularly becomes more complicated again if you're talking about this new normal after the corona crisis. Because by the patent attorneys working from home, we kind of lose this interaction and this dialogue with the inventors and the innovation teams. And we need to make sure that we do not lose this interconnection and this integration into the innovation process, because otherwise creativity goes down, and I'm afraid that probably the patent quality will also again go down if we do not an extra effort in trying to keep our integration with the inventors.
And do you see the end in sight for that when let's just talk very specifically about the impact of COVID on that issue, because I can see why that is a problem. Do you see the picture changing quite soon in the post-COVID era, or do you anticipate an ongoing challenge here?
I think it's an ongoing challenge, and for the time being, because we are now half a year more or less in working from home office, that's more or less the process time we need for filing patent applications anyway. So we still profit of the order backlog we have. Now we need to make sure that we do not lose this integration with the innovation teams. So therefore I will run a workshop with my management team soon where we try to tackle this challenge for the future.
Looking back on this journey, is there anything that you would have done differently?
No.
That's good to hear it. Tell me a little bit more about where you go from here. So let's assume we're into the post-COVID era, that your teams are more integrated with the inventors and the businesses. Give me a sense of how the future now looks for your team and the business in the round as a consequence of what you've changed.
As I said, it's extremely important that the patent attorneys are part of the innovation process. And what I would like to see in the future is that IP questions, invention questions, etc., are a mandatory part of the innovation process, that the patent attorneys are kind of part of the innovative teams, so that they are able to collect and harvest the ideas very early and protect them with the best IP rights.
Are you saying then that there's no one way of doing this, that it's different depending on the type of business?
On the type of business, on the type of how a company is organized. So if you have a technology-driven, centrally organized company, then you probably also should have a centrally organized IP department that is mainly technology-driven, or that it is part of technology. If you, on the other hand, have a more compliance, legally driven company, then it probably makes sense to organize the IP department in the legal function. So it really depends how a company looks like and how a company is organized. And the interesting thing is that Siemens changed in that respect over the years that I have now been working for Siemens. So that means I also had to restructure and reorganize our setup of the IP department at Siemens.
So I'm curious about how you see the value of the patent team on the business in the whole now. Has that changed as a consequence of your new strategy?
Yes, I do think so indeed, because we have become much more strategic. We have become much better integrated into the innovation process. And by that, we are able to contribute in the strategic development of a business by, for example, analyzing competition, by finding sweet spots where we should invest more in terms of R&D and innovation. But to be honest, I think we are not at the end yet. That's the ultimate goal, to become a strategic consultant of the businesses and to show how IP rights can contribute to the success of a business.
So do you think quite commonly now, outside the Siemens bubble, as it were, that patent departments are often seen as a cost center rather than as a strategic, making a strategic contribution to the business? This is a lesson for everyone.
Yeah, I think so. That's a lesson for everyone, and it's the main approach many companies take, to regard patents only as cost. And in that respect, I'm really happy that in the new setup of Siemens, technology and strategy are brought together. And by that, I hope that not only our technological development will become more strategic, but also our strategy will become more technological. And since we as IP department are a part of technology, I also hope that we can contribute to the strategy development of Siemens ourselves.
And maybe some feedback from the board. Is there anything anecdotally you can say that you've heard the board say now with this shift?
Unfortunately not. They just take it as a given.
They just take it as a given, as always. Okay, all right, that's lovely. So did this quality strategy and the development of the IP portfolio lead to a better return on investment?
Yes, indeed. I think we have a better return on investment on our IP rights. Maybe not so much in terms of pure money, license income, but in terms of broader exploitation and commercialization of our IP rights by using them for joint ventures, by using them to get new orders, etc. And these secondary effects are probably much more important, and that we indeed can measure, because exploitation has become one of the 3 pillars of our strategy.
Just a final word, if I may. I'm trying to get the bigger picture, and I'm trying to bring this back to the inventors. What does this mean at that level? And the impact that these inventions almost have on society. Can you just talk a bit more broadly about wider impact of what you're doing here?
It's a very challenging philosophic question. Yeah, I personally feel, and that's the main reason why I'm so fascinated about IP, I feel every human being has kind of a wish to be rewarded and his or her intellectual contribution to be respected. I mean, you can already see that, and I was once responsible for the kindergartens in my community where I lived. You can already see that in kindergarten. The small children are happy to share their ideas, how to do a sketch, how to build a Lego airplane or whatever, under the condition that their intellectual contribution is, so to speak, respected. So they say, I'm happy to give you that, but it's my idea. It's my idea. And that's somehow something that I feel is a natural need of human being, that their intellectual contributions and achievements are respected by the other people. And now in view of the fact that businesses are more and more organized in these digital ecosystems, where not only one company can dominate a business, but where it is a close collaboration between research institutes, between startup companies, between hyperscalers, between companies like Siemens that have this long-term industrial background. Here it is even more important that the individual intellectual contributions and achievements of all these players in such an ecosystem are respected and rewarded. And that's only possible with strong and good and valuable IP rights.